Hello, Pat O'Toole from the news desk of the Irish Farmers Journal here again. I'm now joined by Andrew Doyle, TD for Wicklow, and Cormac Healy, the Executive for Meat Industry Ireland. And that's, I suppose, we've heard a lot here today about the sector response to Brexit. The Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture, which you previously chaired, has issued a report. IFA issued a report, both comprehensive, both quantifying the scale of the problem. But outside of farming, and you're in a mixed constituency, you're a farmer in Wicklow, but a significant urban population. Do you get the feeling that other people realise that the damage that Brexit could potentially do to Ireland, or is it on the agenda at all?
Well, I think it is. I think we could just get a narrow focus and look at our own sector, our own industry, and certainly, you know, from the perspective of the whole agri sector, agri exports, and the wider industry. As Michael Creed inside will be saying, I can tell you, there's no upside for agriculture from Brexit, no matter how hard we work. But we have to make it as close to what exists at the moment. But for the wider community and the wider, broader spectrum, I mean, people think about travel access. They think about anybody that's involved in business, say. One of the points that's made in a seamless border environment, goods travel, paper follows. When you have a harder border of any description, the bureaucracy has to take place first. In other words, the paper goes first before the goods can travel. And from a logistics point of view, I think that's going to prove to be quite significant. And it was interesting, as you know, the Minister held 3 civic dialogues, or all-island dialogues, on the sector. The first one was on basically the livestock, grain, the second one on fishing, and the third one was divided into 4 subgroups: forestry, the horticulture area in all of its guises, the prepared foods and prepared ingredients, and then the cereals, imports, grains. And in all cases, I think, Sterling had a huge impact because it's already happened, but also the logistics of access and the seamless transfer of product either into Britain or through Britain was seen as a significant constraint to their and a challenge to their future. Going beyond that, within wider society itself, I think young people, and if you look at the marches that were even in the UK, anti-Brexit, pro-Remain, it was the younger population, the students' unions, etc., who really were vociferous immediately in the aftermath. And I think the same is here. I think our younger population see the value in being a European as well as being a national member of whatever nationality you are. So I think it does have resonance. I think we tend to concentrate and sometimes maybe miss the bigger picture and maybe consider that we're the only ones affected, but we're not. And I think there is a lot of concern, and that's why, for instance, the government and the Taoiseach took a decision that there should be a working group chaired, high implementation action group chaired by the department of the Taoiseach, rather than a specific minister for Brexit, which can become too sort of narrow focused.
Cormac, I suppose the story of the Irish beef sector going back centuries, never mind generations, has been one of trade with the United Kingdom. When we were part of the British Empire, a huge plank of their cheap food policy was Irish beef. So it's evolved through independence and through co-membership of the European Union, but this is a unique challenge, isn't it? I mean, we've already had issues around labelling and the red tractor for Irish beef. The currency fluctuations have been devastating for stable trade. So what kind of problems are being presented by Brexit already?
Yeah, it certainly is of unprecedented, etc. In terms of the challenge of Brexit. We have a huge tradition. Why wouldn't we? It's our next door neighbour. We share a common language, we share common cultures and tastes. And our food exports overall, but I mean certainly in the context of beef, the volumes involved, 250 to 270,000 tonnes, are phenomenal. And that market has continued to grow and evolve because it is a valuable market on our doorstep, one that would be very hard to replace. Our next largest market is probably a market that takes 50,000 tonnes, and that could be France or Scandinavia. So that's the scale of the challenge, were there to be a serious hindrance or impediment to trade post-Brexit. We obviously hope that that's not the case. I think we have managed to highlight, certainly to government, and I think increasingly now to Brussels, that unique position that the Irish agri-food sector finds itself in with that relationship. I suppose the scale of trying to deal with this, were we to have less favourable trading conditions in the future, will take time. Anything we achieve in that area in the meantime is all to the benefit of the Irish agri-food sector anyway, even if we do have a reasonable outcome, which is what we all want from this negotiation. We want a trading arrangement with the UK that is as close to what we have at the moment. We certainly want a transition period to any new trading relationship, because no industry, no business, no company, no exporter can deal with any kind of a cliff edge outcome.
While British processors and British beef farmers have been competitors of ours and are competitors of ours in the market, surely there's a potential alliance there, because I don't know what your counterpart is saying in the UK, but the threat of having to compete against produce from outside Europe with different standards of equivalence, traceability, animal welfare, would be just as challenging for British farmers and for the British processing industry as for us here. So, do they see that the shared common interest in maintaining standards?
Yeah, I think, Pat, you're right there. I mean, there's certainly many in the UK in the beef sector over there. If we talk about beef, that see that threat of cheaper product coming from South America, from perhaps North America in the future, or Australia for that matter. And they see, Irish beef is well accepted there. There are sensitivities at times, there's always challenges. I mean, we are the exporter of Europe. We are going into these markets, the UK and continental markets, as hopefully the number 2 supplier behind domestic beef. But Irish beef is very welcome in a UK scenario. A huge amount of work has been done to achieve that position. I think to our strength also is the fact that the market has evolved. I mean, this isn't a carcass beef market, sides of beef going over. This is a very sophisticated market and supply chain now, and one that is fresh. So the one advantage in all of that context is that we are on the doorstep. We have very well-defined logistics and supply arrangements, and just-in-time supply and delivery to retail, to food service on a fresh basis. One challenge that they would have, and to our strength, is that they can't just overnight replace fresh products. So we certainly have to play to those trends. I think a huge amount has been done in building up those relationships. I think different segments of the UK market may be less sensitive or not to origin or some of those issues that you've mentioned. So, for many of the clients that we have developed over the years, there is a longer term commitment, and they won't be able to change that quickly. Now, provided we ensure that we don't have tariff scenarios, we don't have quota scenarios, and massive delays in terms of customs and clearance issues that the Minister referred to earlier.
Andrew, I refer to your previous chairing of the Oireachtas Committee. Of course, your current position, Minister for State, the Department of Agriculture, and you have specific responsibility for forestry. The issues around vegetables and meat and milk have been well thrashed out, but I suppose forestry, but not just forestry, also our maritime industry. Could you just touch on the implications for forestry specifically, but also are we looking at a redrawing of our fishing rights vis-a-vis the UK? And I mean, they almost went to war with Iceland in the 70s over fishing rights. So how difficult politically an issue will fishing be, and will that drag itself into the broader agricultural and food debate?
Okay, well, just to deal with the forestry first, if you look at the profile of the Irish forestry business from the point of view of the finished product, at the time of the so-called Celtic Tiger and boom, I suppose the domestic market in this country was taking 80%, 70 to 80% of both the sawn log and the panel board. That's literally flipped to the other way around over the last 10 years. So it's shown great capacity. The industry has shown great capacity to change and target, and it's been very successful at doing it. So the challenge now is Britain. Sterling is the biggest market for our product. It's between 70 and 80% for both sawlog and the sawn timber, should I say, and the board products which we export. Two things: sterling, the 15% wiped off straight away, and secondly is the logistics. And probably more as important, and thankfully so far so good, domestic consumption. So, for instance, I was down in Medite in Clonmel, the board mill plant, 2 weeks ago, where they have a capacity to produce 320,000 tons, cubic meters, should I say, of product, and they aim to produce 350 this year. They have to squeeze it to the last to satisfy the demand. So the demand in the UK has held firm. Those three things are the challenges. Of the three, ironically, sterling, in a way, they adjust to, because they've had to adjust to flipping demand. But demand and logistics are going to, bureaucracy, tariffs, potential tariffs are probably the biggest single stifler, because there is a competitor there, some of which is in the euro, some of which isn't, from Scandinavia. But they've got to like our spruce in particular, believe it or not. People sometimes lambaste it, but spruce its product is particularly suited to what the UK demands. On the fishing, this is really the big challenge, I feel, at the end of the day on negotiations. So we mentioned earlier that the Minister Creed held the three discussions. Fishing is one sector on its own. The UK, volume-wise, as opposed to percentage, probably stands to gain the most out of just saying, okay, we will no longer fish in EU waters, but you all to get out of the UK waters, because of the way the arithmetic works. That said, when everything is brought to a point, and I mentioned this earlier in a discussion with David, actually, who was on before you, everything then will have to go up onto the table to be negotiated through when the final deal. And within the agri sector, that fishing one is going to be really, really critical. There's a lot of emotional attachment, as well as everything else, to the fishing rights, and we have held them as a national asset, quotas, whereas other countries have given them to the fishermen who can sell them. So sometimes you can have a fish, or English quota with a different country's flag, who actually eventually own that quota. But in the end of the day, when a deal is being done, I think it's going to be one of the critical areas that we defend, from our perspective, our ability to fish in the UK waters. We're an island, we share a land border, but we also share a coastline border, insofar as that we're on the one island. And I think that we have fishermen who fish north, which is technically UK waters. So from the island's perspective, I think, not that the North of Ireland fishing fleet is that big, they actually stand to be specific losers. So within all those contexts, there will be an agreement reached. I can't tell you what it'll be. I don't think anyone can, until the whole thing is put up on the table and finally negotiated out. But we've a long way to go, and I think it's good, and as Cormac has said, it's good that we keep it on the agenda. I think we're meeting, myself and Minister Creed and the Taoiseach are meeting the meat industry and farm organisations again later this week to just discuss the further implementation process, the further planning that's to go on. We have been trying to expand markets. In the last 5 or 6 years, the Chinese market has trebled, for instance, but they all pale in ways compared to what the UK is from a point of view of tradition and convenience and established reputation. So we have to protect that the best way we can.
Complicated negotiations ahead.
You could say that, yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.